There are places you're never meant to see. Places built to hold the people the world gave up on. Some are deep in the mountains, some sit on lonely islands surrounded by cold, black water, and one is right inside New York City. They look different, but they all share one thing. Once you go in, you don't come out the same. Alcatraz, Marion, ADX Florence, Rikers Island. Each one built for a reason. Each one hiding stories the world was never supposed to hear. Why was Alcatraz called impossible to escape? Why did Marion lock itself down forever? Why does ADX keep men in total silence? And why is Rikers, a city jail, feared more than them all? These are not movie sets. These are real places. Real people lived and died behind these walls. So what really happened inside America's most dangerous jails? Let's find out. It was supposed to be impossible to escape. An island fortress surrounded by freezing water, deadly currents, and heavily guarded walls. A place where America's most dangerous men were locked away for good. This is the real story of Alcatraz. Before we dive in, if you enjoy real stories told with truth, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit that like button. Your support helps us bring more forgotten places like this to light. Now, let's get started. The name alone sent chills down the spine, Alcatraz. But this isn't about legends or ghost stories. It's about what really happened behind those thick stone walls, sitting in the cold, dense fog of San Francisco Bay. In 1934, Alcatraz opened as a maximum security federal prison. It wasn't built for just any criminal. It was designed for the men who couldn't be controlled anywhere else. The escape artists, the troublemakers, the ones who made other prisons unsafe. The government needed to send a powerful message, a deterrent that would make every criminal think twice. Alcatraz was that message. Its location was its greatest strength, a lonely, barren rock surrounded by icy, violent waters. Even if an inmate managed to break free from the prison walls, they'd face a brutal 2-kilometer swim through freezing currents just to reach the shore. It was a journey few, if any, could survive. Inside, life was a symphony of cold, hard discipline. Every movement was watched, every word was measured. Silence wasn't just a suggestion, it was a rule. The day began at 6:30 a.m., followed by hours of hard labor, and ended back in a cell no larger than a small closet. The guards controlled the entire rhythm of life, from mealtime to bedtime. The air was thick with the smell of salt water and iron, and the constant sound of waves crashing against the island mixed with the deafening clang of steel doors slamming shut. Alcatraz was designed to break a man's spirit, and for many, it did. But this prison was also home to some of the most infamous criminals in American history. Al Capone, the notorious king of Chicago's underworld, walked these very halls. George "Machine Gun" Kelly, who once boasted he was untouchable, spent his final years scrubbing floors here. And Robert Stroud, forever known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, became a legend for his decades spent in isolation studying birds, though he never kept any on the island itself. To the outside world, these men were symbols of power and rebellion. Inside Alcatraz, they were just numbers, stripped of their notoriety. Yet, even in a place built for absolute control, human ingenuity found a way. Inmates began to watch, to plan. They learned the guards' routines, studied the shifting tides around the island, and memorized the layout of every pipe, bolt, and vent. Hope, it seemed, could not be entirely extinguished. Then came 1962, the year that forever shattered the myth of Alcatraz. 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, vanished into the night. They were patient, intelligent, and incredibly resourceful. Over several months, using sharpened spoons and makeshift drills, they painstakingly chipped away at the concrete around the air vents in their cells. They fashioned a raft and life vest from over 50 stolen raincoats, sealing them with glue they cooked up from prison-issue materials. On the night of June 11th, they slipped through the holes, climbed to the roof, and disappeared. To fool the guards during nightly checks, they left behind dummy heads in their beds, crafted from soap, toilet paper, and real hair collected from the barber shop. The deception was so convincing that their escape wasn't discovered until the next morning. When the alarm finally blared, the island descended into chaos. A massive search effort scoured the bay, but no bodies were ever definitively found. Did they drown in the cold, unforgiving waves? Or did they make it to shore and vanish into thin air? To this day, Their fate remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. The escape was a massive embarrassment for the federal government. Alcatraz had been advertised as unbreakable, yet 3 men had simply vanished. In truth, the prison was already on its last legs. The cost of running the island was astronomical. Every single supply, from food to fresh water, had to be shipped in by boat. The salty sea air relentlessly corroded everything. The walls, the pipes, and the metal doors rusted faster than they could be replaced. Public opinion was also shifting. People started to question if such harsh, isolating punishment was truly effective or humane. Just 1 year after the infamous escape, in 1963, Alcatraz closed its gates for good. But the legend of Alcatraz never really died. The island transformed into a powerful symbol of fear, of power, and of extreme isolation. It became a tourist destination, with visitors flocking to walk through the cold, empty cells, some claiming they could still feel the presence of the men who once lived and died there. The guards who worked there remembered the crushing silence, the palpable tension, and the bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into everything. For the inmates who survived their time on the rock, freedom was often tainted. Many carried the shadow of Alcatraz with them for the rest of their lives. But the story of Alcatraz is more than just a ghost story or a thrilling escape tale. It represents a deeper truth about America's ongoing obsession with control. When one impenetrable wall fell, another was already being designed, stronger and colder than the last. The closure of Alcatraz didn't signify a move toward mercy. It marked an evolution in punishment. As the island prison fell silent, a new kind of facility was being conceptualized. A place that would continue what Alcatraz started, but without the ocean, without the chance of escape, and in some cases, without even the hope of seeing sunlight. What began as a fortress on the sea would soon move to the heart of the country, where the idea of control through isolation would take on a new, even more extreme form. The legacy of Alcatraz didn't end in 1963. It just changed its address, setting the stage for the next chapter in the history of incarceration. When Alcatraz went dark, the world thought the era of impossible prisons was over. But America wasn't finished. The government needed a new model, a place safer, smarter, and far more controlled. That place rose in the quiet fields of southern Illinois. Its name was Marion. In 1963, the same year Alcatraz shut down, USP Marion opened its gates. It was meant to be the future of high-security prisons. No cold ocean, no deadly tides, just endless rows of fences and walls stretching across the land. Officials promised Marion would be more humane, a modern correctional center where discipline replaced brutality. But promises are easy to make. Reality was different. From the beginning, Marion became home to the hardest men in the system. Many came straight from Alcatraz, men too violent, too unpredictable, too unbroken. The guards were young, strict, and trained to keep control at any cost. The tension was always there, like a wire pulled too tight. Fights erupted in the yard. Knives appeared where no metal should exist. Everyone watched everyone else. No one felt safe. As the years passed, Marion's reputation darkened. It became the new fortress, a place whispered about in other prisons. The control unit, a small section deep inside, was created to isolate the most dangerous inmates. There, men lived alone in cells barely big enough to stretch their arms. No conversation, no contact, just the sound of their own breathing echoing off concrete walls. Some were kept like that for weeks, others for years. Then came 1983, the year everything changed. It was October 22nd, a cold morning. 2 correctional officers, Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman, were murdered in separate attacks just hours apart. Both men were stabbed to death by inmates serving life sentences. The killings shocked the nation. It was the deadliest day in the history of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And from that moment, Marion would never open up again. The entire facility went into lockdown. At first, it was temporary, a few days to restore order. But days turned into weeks, then months, then years. Inmates were confined to their cells for 23 hours a day, every day. 1 hour was given for solitary recreation, inside small steel cages with no human contact. There were no group meals, no shared programs, no physical touch. Guards spoke through doors. The sound of footsteps replaced the sound of voices. This new system became permanent. It was called Control Through Isolation. The experiment at Marion was complete. The prison became the first in America to operate entirely under lockdown, 23 hours a day, 7 days a week. No riots, no escapes, just silence. But that silence came with a cost. Inmates began to lose their minds. Some refused to speak for months. Others screamed through the night, unable to tell if it was day or dark. Psychologists warned that isolation was breaking people from the inside. Still, the system stayed the same. Outside the walls, officials called it success. Inside, men called it slow death. One inmate later wrote that at Marion, time didn't move, it dissolved. Each day looked like the one before, a never-ending loop of concrete, steel, and fluorescent light. Even the guards began to change. Years of watching men crumble took its toll. Many left their jobs. Others stayed, hardened and detached. Marion had become a machine, one that stripped humanity from both sides of the bars. But Marion's design inspired something bigger. In the 1990s, the government wanted a new facility, one that took everything learned from Marion and turned it into a blueprint. A place with no flaws. A place where escape was unthinkable and rebellion impossible. If Marion was the experiment, the next prison would be the masterpiece. And so, deep in the mountains of Colorado, the idea was reborn. Concrete walls thicker, windows smaller, doors heavier. Total surveillance, total control, total silence. The final evolution of the system that began with Alcatraz and perfected itself through Marion. What came next wasn't a prison. It was something entirely different. A living machine built to erase every trace of freedom. In 1994, the government unveiled its final creation, a prison unlike anything the world had seen before. Hidden in the dry mountains of Colorado and surrounded by miles of open desert and barbed wire, they called it ADX Florence. But the men inside called it something else, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This was the end of the line, the place where America sent those it could not control. Terrorists, spies, cartel leaders, killers of guards, and men who had turned other prisons into war zones. If Marion was a cage, ADX was a tomb. Every detail of Florence was designed for total isolation. The cells were made entirely of concrete. The floor, the bed, even the desk. A single slit of glass, for inches wide, let in a thin line of sunlight. From inside, inmates could see nothing. Not the sky, not another human being, not even the guard walking past their door. Meals came through small steel slots. Recreation meant 1 hour in a concrete box alone, sometimes with a narrow view of the sky. There was no contact, no sound, no touch, just the hum of ventilation and the echo of footsteps fading down the hall. Each man lived 23 hours a day in silence, with 1 hour to breathe outside air, and even that hour was spent inside a cage. Some called it clean torture. Others called it necessary. The list of inmates read like a dark history book. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Ramzi Youssef, who helped plan the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. And later, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the drug lord whose tunnels once stretched across Mexico. Every man who entered ADX faced the same reality. No escape, no privacy, and no sound of another human voice. Inside those walls, time worked differently. Some prisoners began to lose themselves. A few refused to leave their cells, even when allowed. Others talked to the walls or wrote letters that made no sense. Former guards described the silence as heavy, almost alive. Psychologists warned that long-term isolation could destroy the mind. Yet Florence continued to operate exactly as designed. Perfect order, perfect control, perfect isolation. In 2012, a group of inmates filed a lawsuit against the Bureau of Prisons. They claimed ADX caused severe mental suffering, hallucinations, depression, even suicide. One prisoner wrote that he screamed just to hear a voice, even if it was his own. The case led to small reforms, limited mental health checks, slight increases in recreation time. But the system itself didn't change. ADX remained the same fortress it was built to be. Even the guards weren't untouched by the atmosphere. Some said the silence followed them home. Others left after only a few months, saying it felt like working in a graveyard where everyone was still alive. There was no noise, no chaos, no smell of the outside world. Only the sound of doors locking, one after another, until nothing moved. For the government, ADX Florence was the final answer to violence. a place where no one could ever kill again. But for many, it became a question. How far can safety go before it becomes cruelty? If control is complete, what's left of humanity? And if this is what it means to keep order, what does that say about the world beyond those walls? As the sun sets behind the Rockies, the desert grows silent. The walls of ADX glow faintly under the last light of day. Inside, thousands of eyes stare at the same concrete ceiling, each man trapped in a world built for peace through isolation, a peace that feels colder than punishment itself. But while silence ruled in Colorado, chaos was rising hundreds of miles away, not in a mountain fortress or a remote island, but right in the middle of a city where control and compassion collided every single day. A place that became more dangerous than any supermax in America. A place called Rikers Island. While isolation ruled the Rockies, chaos was building in the heart of New York City. Not hidden behind mountains or surrounded by freezing waters, but sitting right in plain sight. Between Queens and the Bronx, on a small piece of land surrounded by the East River, stood Rikers Island. A place meant to be a city jail, but became one of the most feared prisons in America. Rikers was never supposed to be a nightmare. When it opened in the 1930s, the plan was simple: move prisoners off the overcrowded Manhattan jails and build something larger, safer, and more humane. But as the years went by, that promise crumbled. The population exploded. Thousands of men and women, many not yet convicted of any crime, were packed inside its crumbling walls. What was meant to be temporary became a permanent stop for the forgotten. Unlike Alcatraz or ADX Florence, Rikers wasn't isolated by geography. It was surrounded by the city itself. The skyline was visible from the yard, a constant reminder of freedom just beyond reach. Yet inside, there was little order. Violence became part of daily life. Guards feared inmates. Inmates feared guards. Everyone feared the system that trapped them both. Some called it a war zone. Others called it survival. Stories from inside Rikers sounded like something from another world. Fights broke out in hallways. Gangs controlled cell blocks. Broken lights flickered over leaking ceilings. Some inmates waited months or even years for a trial that never seemed to come. But behind the statistics, there were human stories, stories that forced the nation to look closer. One name changed everything: Khalif Browder. In 2010, at just 16 years old, Khalif was accused of stealing a backpack. He was sent to Rikers because his family couldn't afford bail. He was never convicted. Yet he spent 3 years there, most of it in solitary confinement. 3 years for a crime that was never proven. Khalif was beaten by inmates, assaulted by guards, and left alone in a small cell for months at a time. When he was finally released, the charges were dropped. But the damage was already done. In 2015, unable to escape the memories of Rikers, Khalif took his own life. His story shocked the country. Protests erupted. Politicians spoke his name. For the first time, millions of people saw what Rikers truly was: a place not of justice, but of neglect. Reports followed, exposing years of abuse, corruption, and deaths inside the jail. Guards working double shifts in unsafe conditions. Inmates denied medical care. Young men punished with isolation instead of help. Even the city's mayor admitted the system was broken beyond repair. Rikers became a symbol, not of punishment, but of failure. A reflection of what happens when a city forgets its own people. While ADX and Marion perfected control, Rikers drowned in chaos. It wasn't a fortress or a laboratory. It was a machine falling apart, one life at a time. In 2017, after decades of public outcry, New York City announced a plan to shut Rikers down for good. The idea was to replace it with smaller, safer facilities spread across the city. But closing an island built on decades of suffering is not simple. Deadlines passed. Promises shifted. And as of today, Rikers still stands. A broken city within a city, holding thousands of souls waiting for justice that may never come. What makes Rikers different isn't its size or its walls. It's the fact that it sits so close to everything America calls freedom, yet remains a world apart. For those inside, the city skyline glows through the fog like a cruel reminder that freedom isn't just about walls. It's about a system that works, and for many, it never has. From the isolation of Alcatraz to the silence of ADX, and now the chaos of Rikers, America's prisons tell one long story. A story of control, power, and the human cost of both. And if there's one truth that connects them all, it's this. When the system builds walls to contain its worst fears, it sometimes ends up trapping itself inside. From Alcatraz to Rikers, every prison tells a piece of America's hidden story. Behind the steel doors and concrete walls are voices, unheard, unseen, but never truly silent. They echo through time, whispering about justice, punishment, and what happens when the line between the two disappears. Alcatraz was about control. ADX Florence was about perfection through isolation. USP Marion tested the limits of the human mind. And Rikers showed us what happens when a system forgets the meaning of justice itself. Each one was built to protect society. But in their shadows, we see something deeper. A reflection of fear, of power, of the idea that punishment can fix what society refuses to understand. Yet time and again, these walls don't just hold criminals, they hold the truth about who we are. For every escape attempt, there was a man dreaming of freedom. For every act of violence, there was a plea for help. And for every door that closed, another story began. Stories of survival, regret, and sometimes redemption. America calls these places correctional facilities. But what they really correct is our illusion of control. Because inside those walls, humanity still exists, raw, fragile, and desperate to be seen. The same heartbeat that exists out here beats in there too. And maybe that's the hardest part to face. That these prisons aren't just places of confinement, they are mirrors. Mirrors reflecting the cracks in our justice system and in ourselves. So the next time you hear about Alcatraz or Rikers or any prison said to be unbreakable, remember this. Walls don't make a place evil. People do. Systems do. And sometimes, the most dangerous prisons aren't the ones made of bars and steel, but the ones built inside a nation's conscience. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe for more real stories that reveal the truth behind the walls. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us what you think in the comments below. Because the conversation about justice starts with us.